And it's actually Teresa Talbot. I married a French man, unfortunately, and they never say the last letter that they put in their words, even in their names. So I have been a technical writer for about 20 years. 7 of those years were abroad, outside of the United States. 9 countries in total, if you add in the U.S., which can be foreign. I went to the University of Washington, got a degree in technical communications with a minor in international studies. This all started for me when I was about 4 years old, and my family befriended a Japanese family that was I grew up in the Seattle area. It was in Seattle on an exchange. They had a daughter my same age. She spoke no English. I spoke no Japanese. I've never had a better friend. We got along great. And about 10 years later, I went over and stayed with her family for a summer, and she came, actually the year previously, she came and stayed with me for a summer, so we did an exchange when we were older. And I returned from that experience with a new lease on life, so to speak. I went from being your American teenager that thought the world ended outside the greater Seattle area, and I also realized that all those stereotypes are normally false. If anybody thinks most Japanese women are like the stereotype of the geisha, wow. I know many Japanese women, and none of them will follow their husbands around 6 steps back. So this is what I wanted. I wanted the world as my oyster. I wanted to go, and I wanted to do exactly what my parents gave me the opportunity to do. I wanted to live in these different countries, absorb this culture, absorb great food and great wine. This is what I got. So the moral of this story is, don't ever think that what you actually set out and wanted is that it's a bad thing that you don't get that, because I would never give this up for anything. I'm also stateside, so I'm back in San Francisco. The how. In my early years of technical writing, I started to realize that there are a lot of on the Society for Technical Communications websites, at least this was probably now 10 years ago, there were a good number of advertisements for technical writers overseas. And I began to realize that it's mainly because English is the most spoken second language in the world. Not first language, but the most spoken second language. Why that's important is because in translation, you want your translators to be translating into their native language. So there are more people out there that speak English at a level that will allow them to translate your documentation into a clear docs in their language. So that meant that a lot of the tech companies abroad wanted English-speaking technical communicators, and actually US-speaking technical communicators. I've had jobs in the UK because I am a U.S. English speaker. And then there are the legal parameters on how you can do this. I've done all 5 of these that I'll explain. One is a student visa, and a certain work visa, not a student education visa. The second one up there represents the company exchange, so you get a company to either send you over there and work in a foreign country, and they take care of most of the paperwork. The third one is a representation of starting a company in a foreign country. That is beneficial to the foreign country because you bring in tax dollars. You pay a lot more taxes if you start a company than you would if you were a regular not necessarily a citizen, but a regular worker in a foreign country. The fourth one, is working as a contractor in another country, but having them pay you in US dollars in the US. And then the third one is the green card. So that is not recommended, but it worked for me. All right, so the company sponsor, my first big a job abroad where I moved myself there and lived there. I lived in Holland for about 2 years. The company brought me over. They took care of everything. I found the job on the SDC website. At this time, I was also looking at a job in England. Both of them gave me offers. Due to cost of living, I chose Amsterdam. Because, and I took a 2/3 pay cut, moving from Los Angeles to Amsterdam, but my cost of living stayed the same. The company in London was actually offering me more money, about half my Los Angeles salary, but the cost of living in London is probably even more expensive than it is to live in Los Angeles. So financially, I couldn't make that one work. So I chose Holland, moved over there, and one of the things that surprised me the most about Holland, I'd heard before going, Holland has this excellent healthcare system. Everybody's covered. That is true. If you are a human being in Holland, you are covered by the state medical plan. Don't get sick in Holland. It is not. I've got horror stories that make your skin crawl. Their level of care from an American standpoint, and American with insurance standpoint, I should say, it's pretty low. The reverse side of that is I can't look an American mother in the face who can't take her kids to the well baby appointments because she doesn't have insurance. So there's good and bad about all healthcare, but what shocked me going over there is that all healthcare is different and has all state healthcare and or insurance-funded healthcare, private insurance-funded healthcare has its benefits, but it is something you need to consider before moving over there, or it can be a large consideration, especially if you are moving a family. I was single and childless, so that wasn't as big of a problem. As I said, the permit process for this was easy on my part. I just had to sign a lot of dotted lines. The company did everything for me. They moved me over. They got my visa. They took care of everything. I think they had to prove to their government that no other Dutch person could do my job. And the way they did that was just said, we need an American English technical writer. And they got that passed through. The work culture in Holland is efficient. It's very efficient. At Salesforce, where I am now, same as Leah Cutter, who spoke earlier, we use a process called Agile. And the funny thing is that the Agile process is exactly the way the company that I worked for in Holland worked, only they didn't call it Agile. It was just how they worked. So they had a process that they followed. We had meetings every day. We said what we did the day before and what we were going to do that day. It was scrums, if you're familiar with the Agile process. And I really found that this was a highly efficient working community. Everybody knew what was expected of them and did it. They also have a ruling in Holland that if the company goes through resizing, they do it specifically on the numbers. The last people in the company are the first people to be removed out of the company during resizing. This actually hit me about a year in, and I needed to leave the company. And I started my own business in Holland. And as I said, why this is effective in Holland is because they tax you probably about 70% if you're a company. So again, it became not financially reliable to stay there, but mainly because I had some culture stories about Holland. Probably everybody in here has heard the phrase going Dutch. I've never known a stereotype to be so true. One of the things that after landing in Holland, is that I realized I needed to start doing things that I like to do. I play soccer. So I joined a Dutch ladies soccer team, had a blast. There was one other American on the team, and we decided, or the team decided to have an end of the season potluck. We grabbed a salad and a dessert and headed off, and we walked in the door, and they said, where are your receipts? And we said, oh, don't worry about it, it's a potluck, just, you don't owe us anything. And they said, okay, fine. We had the party. She and the other American and I decided to leave, and they say, wait. Everybody pooled their receipts. They added them up. We paid €5.50 to leave the party. So it's true. The Dutch will not pay a penny more than they owe. But then again, I never really felt like I was getting a bad deal in Holland. I always just felt that everything was so fair. You had to be fair in Holland. So as I said, I tried to find ways that I was going to emerge into this culture, and one shocking thing were Irish pubs. And this is not just Holland, this is world over. If you want to find other expats or people that are working outside their home country, go to an Irish pub. wherever city you are, you will find you may not find other Irish or Irish at all, but you will find other expats. And I have a great group of friends that that I found pretty much in that vein, just going to the Irish pub, meeting one person, and then them introducing me to other friends. The company that I worked for was 40% non-Dutch, and that is where I met my husband, who at the time did not ask me out because he did not believe in working in the same company. And then I left, he asked me out, and that was the end of that story, and you'll hear more of that later, so it's not just thrown in there. So then I decided, after starting the company and finding that 70% of my income was going straight into the Dutch government, and my husband, who was just a boyfriend at the time, decided to go to Bulgaria, of all places, so I went back to Japan. And I actually worked in that big tower for a company called Lionbridge. It's a translation company, and they were helping Epson translate one of their printer manuals so that they could, again, translate it from English instead of Japanese, because they were getting horrible results, and it was costing them an arm and a leg to translate from their Japanese manuals. So I found this job, again, through I think it was a Monster or a Yahoo board I think it was out of the UK, and they were advertising for an American writer to work abroad. So as far as cost of living in Japan, it is extremely expensive, and the only way I was able to make this work financially is that the Lionbridge, the company, paid for my room, my transportation, everything except for my food. They paid for my tickets over there. The visa was extremely easy. In Japan, as long as you're not planning to stay forever, they will just keep stamping your passports. And because I was billing from my U.S. Social Security number as a contractor, and they were paying me in U.S. dollars back in the U.S., I didn't need a work visa. All I needed was the stay visa. The work culture in Japan was quite different. I grew up with a culture of the only stupid question is the one not asked. That is not true in Japan. You do not ask questions. So I need to know how this ink, how I can change the ink in this printer. I can't ask that question. I have to tiptoe my way around it to find some way to state it so that they realize I don't know how to change the ink. They've got to tell me. It makes for some very long meetings, and if you don't get what you want, you just schedule another meeting and go on from there. So then I decided I was going to meet up with my boyfriend in Bulgaria, and we were going to start another company abroad. And this was a very easy process for the work visa and the company. All I needed was this ink stamp of my logo for my company, and that declared me a viable company within Bulgaria. The problem was the living visa. They never, ever gave me a resident visa in Bulgaria. And this is because the Bulgarian government mirrors the U.S. government's policy for their citizens. So in the U.S., we don't let a lot of Bulgarians come over and work, so they weren't going to let an American go and work there. Live there and make money and pay taxes, yes, but I couldn't live there. We got around that in some sneaky ways, and I'll just say that the mafia is not always a bad thing. I may owe somebody my firstborn, but they haven't come collecting yet. I'm going to skip because up to coming back to the U.S., and then we can, if we have time, we'll discuss the other countries that I lived in. Because coming back is also a bit of a culture shock. You've unlearned a lot of things, and you got to learn them back. Things like being able to sit at a table in a restaurant all night and order chips and water. They really don't care if you do that in Europe. They do here. So that was a bit of a shock. Cost of living, of course, is much higher here than most of the places that I worked. But salaries are much higher as well. As I said, I've already mentioned about my feeling on healthcare in the U.S. I love my level of service. I have a problem with the fact that other people don't have the same. And then this Frenchman who didn't ever date within the company is now working at Salesforce as well. So either I am not a viable relationship for him, or his standards have changed. So some of the other places that I lived and worked, I did both of these under a student visa, and I found that these are definitely, the biggest thing was that we thought we were speaking a common language when in fact we didn't. I think orientated is a great example. Also things like what we would call a fanny pack. Never say that in New Zealand, ever. It's actually, it's a bad word for a tampon, we'll say. And I also worked in Spain, and this is one place where my husband and I would go back to in a heartbeat. Both of us agree that this is the place to live. Cost of living comes in strongly as a barrier, however, because your salaries are much lower than your cost of living. This is why many Spaniards live with not just dual generations, but triple generations within the same household, because you don't have the capital to start out on your own. The Swiss. I was living in Barcelona, and I would go to Switzerland. I kind of felt like it was a break from the chaos of Spain to the efficiency of Switzerland, where the trains actually ran on time, and everything was down to the minute, whereas in Spain, you just kind of knew a bus might come at a certain time, possibly, maybe. Both Switzerland and Spain, I contracted from the U.S., so the only issue was the living visa, and that was where the green card comes in, because in our move from Bulgaria, after dealing with immigration problems in Bulgaria, we really wanted to find the easiest way, and that was the easiest way, was just to get married. So we had a wedding, a marriage 2 years before we actually had our wedding. And I married a French, so let's talk about the French. Came back to Salesforce, and they found out I was married to a Frenchman. They put me on a French team. They just bought a company called Intranet, and I got to be their tech writer. So I felt like I was working back in France again. The thing that really shocked me about the French is they get strike days. They get 10 strike days a year. Unfortunately, that's not so you can strike. It's for when the public services strike, like a snow day, you can stay home without hurting your career. And the bottom is just where, this is actually where my husband is from, and this is what most people, the top is what most people think of France. I encourage everybody to, if they have the desire, to look into these options. It was far easier than I had thought back in the 1990s when I first started on this journey. And it is rewarding beyond belief, career, personal. It's more easily done than it looks. And if anybody has questions, I can help you out with them. Let me know either by, I didn't do a slide with my contact, but I do have cards. So let me know either by email or right now.
Questions? Oh, I see some upstairs. I'll get you in a minute. This guy first.
So a documentation issue would be about Unicode.
Yes.
How much of an issue is that in these other countries? You obviously went to Japan, where Unicode would be wildly different from say, San Francisco. Can you comment on the Unicode and documentation issue?
The only the only places that I've come up with that is at the translation company that I worked in, and that I can't say that I know more about it than it was a line in my XML that I had to make sure was there for the translator, so they knew what to change it to. Unfortunately, I didn't work more than that, and it just what needed to be in the metadata of my doc. Does that answer anywhere close?
The answer you have.
That's true.
Upstairs. Okay.
He's grabbing somebody up here.
I wondered if you could comment. So, if you're working remotely, say as an American with U.S. clients,
yes.
but you are on a a regular traveler visa, like 90-day Schengen or a 6-month UK one, are you allowed to open your laptop and work for the U.S. client? What's the actual rule about that?
It depends on the country that you're in. Switzerland and Japan, it was no problem for them. Spain was a little bit of a different issue. They made me make sure that I reported all my taxes. So I was in Spain for 2 years, and both years I had to show my employer that I was filing my taxes and paying my taxes for that time that I was billing the client, whether it be American, Spanish, Switzerland, or Swiss, or that I had to prove it. But as I said, the Swiss and the Japanese didn't bat an eye.
Any more questions up here? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
On a very similar subject, how do you find out what a particular country's policy is on that if you're there for an extended period of time but working while you're there?
It does, for me at least, there was a lot of internet searches depending on the country. I had to do it for myself in Spain and in Bulgaria. And that, unfortunately, in Bulgaria, a lot of the English information was not translated correctly, and I came up on a lot of problems. But it really, unless the company was doing it for me, or like in Holland, it was down to just searching government sites and their English. Most government sites had an English version, and I could at least get somewhere with them.
Are you fluent, or do you have working knowledge of any of the languages in the countries you lived in?
Thank you for asking that, because I totally forgot to talk about that. French is as good as it gets for me in foreign language. I can hold my own, especially with my in-laws. But my 4-year-old daughter speaks better French than I do. So I have only ever worked in English. I have worked at my French company's French office. They could get to a certain point, and then they just go back to English because their English was better than mine. In every country that I worked in, my working language was English.
Was your student work, when you had a student work visa, were you actually a student?
Yeah, for the UK, yes. It was in between semesters in the summertime. For New Zealand, I was just graduated. And the BUNAC, the website that I had up there, was for anybody within 6 months of graduating or a student at a major university. We had a question down here.
Okay, coming downstairs right now.
I can repeat it if you just want to. Sure.
Just shout.
So I wanted to know how much was your resume and also portfolio? Yes. A topic, country by country. Okay. They probably have different standards for job applications, especially as I can write.
Yes. She wanted to know what my resume looked like when applying to these different jobs. I can't say that for my first job for Holland that I did it any different. I didn't have a lot of experience and didn't know. So it was just my basic U.S. Resume with a cover letter stating, why I wanted to do this. What's this crazy Seattleite wanting to do going up to Holland? They have the same weather, is all I can say. But after that, it did come down with, especially I worked for the same company in Japan and in Spain, Lionbridge, and it was showing them that I knew how to work in foreign cultures, where half of the meeting was usually done in the local language, and being comfortable with that. And not caring that, they might be talking about the dang technical writer that never gets anything that they try to teach her, but just showing them that I had that capability to interact with engineers of a different culture. And I think I just did that by listing out, working with Dutch teams, working with Japanese. I did a couple of, when I was in Los Angeles, I did a couple of translations from a Fujitsu document that they had, the Japanese had translated into English, and it was needed to be retranslated into real English, that sort of thing, just sort of bringing out, any time that I worked with somebody not on U.S. soil, I did a lot of bringing that out. And was there another part to that? Okay. Yeah.
Have you lived abroad since having a family? I'm in the back.
Oh, sorry.
In case you need somewhere to look.
I have not. Well, except for going to France. I spent one summer in France, mostly at my in-laws, but a little bit back in Paris at my company So at my company's office. So it wasn't. I didn't need a work visa to do that, and that was. So yeah, with a family. I'm out. You could probably talk to my husband about living in the U.S. As an expat with a family. And how that works. But is there something in particular? I think healthcare is a major, more of a concern than it was for me originally when you have a family. Of course, cost of living. I was just looking at rentals, whereas usually when you have a family, you're looking more for homes that are sold, not rented, and that sort of thing. But I could only tell you, the concerns that would be greater or less as an expat and with a family. Yes, you.
Sorry.
It seems like there is variance between markets in terms of how much you get paid versus how much it costs to live there. Is San Francisco still the best place to live, to be a typical writer and make a lot of money?
He asked the variance between salary and cost of living, and if I find San Francisco to be the best place as far as that goes, and I would say yes. My family is we currently live in the city, and we are going to soon move outside the city into the suburbs for cost and also for a yard. There are no yards in San Francisco, and my kids don't know what grass is, so we will be moving outside there. Yes, sir.
Hi. Sorry, I just had one question. You must have lived in countries that didn't have a tax treaty with the U.S. How did you deal with the, let's say, increased cost of living of having to pay two countries' taxes?
I think the only one that really comes under that is that I worked in is Bulgaria. Yeah. And they were pretty much. I didn't submit my earnings in Bulgaria that I charged with my Bulgarian company back to the U.S. Had I moved money from Bulgaria to the U.S., I would have needed to have done that. Right. But the cost of living in Bulgaria is so low that there's. And the salaries are equal to that. Mm-hmm. I wasn't at the point where I could do that. But then it becomes just of moving money, and they in the U.S. would see that, hey, where did this $10,000 come from this account in Bulgaria? They ask questions, and you need to pay your taxes and declare it at that point.
Got it.
All right. Thank you so much, Teresa.
Thank you.